Hello, guys and gals, me Mudahar, and boy, oh boy, do we live in a nightmare. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a gamer. I know you guys are gamers. I know we all love playing video games, but it seems as though getting access to our video game hardware, well, that's a thing of the past. Now, look, everything's getting crazy expensive. I saw the other day even CPUs are getting expensive. Dude, I was looking to upgrade. I honestly was. And now I'm just sitting here thinking, you know what? I think I'll wait like a year or two or something. Maybe by the time GTA 6 drops on PC, maybe, just maybe, things will start, getting to normal. Now, look, a few days ago, I had a valid crash out over the fact that a bunch of gaming stocks were going down. A lot of these tech bros were thinking Genie 3 was going to change gaming when all it's doing is making walking simulators on video on assets that has been trained on. Anyways, Nvidia just apparently today, according to the guys over the information, said that, yeah, it seems as though because of memory shortage issues, and they were going to prioritize, AI-focused chip production, that RTX 60 series line, that might just be delayed, ladies and gentlemen, and we actually might be producing these things at the end of 2027. Man, if it wasn't for the YouTube terms of services, I'd just get up on the screen, bend over, spread my ass cheeks, and just let the big tech companies have it at this point. Now, it's interesting because in the last few weeks, we kind of talked about an interesting conspiracy theory where it feels like a lot of the computers that we're going to be using is probably going to head towards the cloud, for instance. And I really feel like for a lot of these tech companies like Nvidia, really anybody, I think it's really in their benefit financially that, hey, instead of this guy owning access to a computer, just rent the fucking thing from the cloud. Just store everything in the cloud. I'm actually kind of fearful that I think in 10 years it's going to be kind of normal for a lot of people to just be renting their computer online, right? A lot of people don't even really need to mess with the computer. A lot of people just get their stuff done on a cell phone, on a tablet. And you know what? When you look at that market, at least the Apple side of it is so heavily locked down in North America that you can't even install an application without going through a whole bunch of extra steps if you're going outside of things like the App Store, okay? Now, when it comes to computers being owned in the cloud, I really feel like we'll get to a point where you can only run the approved apps list. You can only really do what the companies allow you to do. Now, look, this isn't just a conspiracy that I'm having out of nowhere. I feel like this is the trajectory things are headed, and it doesn't really have to be that way. In the last few months, my content, I've sort of been focusing on open source stuff, self-hosting shit all the time. Now, while Nvidia doesn't seem to give a shit about the gamer, obviously, why would they? They're making a whole lot of money selling their shovels to all the AI bros in the world. And even when you're not a company like Nvidia, when you're just in the gaming space like PlayStation, you have to pretty much remind people that, boys, we are good for at least the holiday. And you know why the holidays are important, right? Because Grand Theft Auto 6 is dropping. I'm pretty sure Sony would not want it to have PlayStation's not available, especially when the hottest game of the generation basically is dropping, right? So, this is the scraps that everyone is sort of fighting for at the moment. Now, the interesting thing about the internet being in the cloud is obviously it is problematic for a lot of reasons. About a week ago, we literally talked about how Microsoft sold you guys out by basically giving the Federal Bureau of Investigation keys to access encrypted data on their online platform, right? On BitBlocker, which is not okay. All right, nobody should be allowed to peek through your shit, all right, whatsoever. You should be allowed to host your content, you should be allowed to own what you have, and not have Big Brother look through whenever they want. And honestly, when it comes to a lot of these companies, storing your stuff on their servers always means that if it comes to your photos, videos, your actual personal shit, don't think for a second that these big companies aren't training their big-ass proprietary models on your shit without giving you a chunk of the pie and also charging you to use it at the end. We live in a world where our shit gets stolen on a near-daily basis just to be sold back to us, okay? That's the psychotic nature of today's day and age. Now, interestingly enough, obviously I've switched, I've sort of talked about a lot of this content, but I haven't really discussed the sort of open like source, the sort of like self-hosted side that a lot of these companies don't want to tell you. Now, one of my big issues with things like artificial intelligence is what we call rate limits. So obviously, if you ever use things like ChatGPT, if you ever use things like Claude, if you ever use things like Google Gemini, you probably realize that after, using it for so much, it'll eventually tell you, hey man, you gotta wait till tomorrow. So not only are they gatekeeping this technology, but they're limiting people's access to it. And of course, the reason for that is it's fucking expensive. One ChatGPT request costs several actual Google search requests, okay? And it only gets more expensive. The more and more intricate these AI tools get, the more and more insane these prompts become. And the more insane a prompt becomes, the more power it takes to actually run it. That's just basic understanding of how this shit works. Now, about last year, I talked about something called DeepSeek, if you guys don't remember it. Remember when, that dropped into the market, this little AI tool from China, and all of a sudden, Nvidia stocks kind of crashed a little bit? All of a sudden, the Chinese were out there building an actual artificial intelligence that anybody could, grab access to and use. Now, the thing is, what's really interesting about this technology is that while DeepSeek looked like it basically disappeared into the ether, surprisingly, it's used in a lot of actual applications, at least mostly in Asia and a lot of those countries in that area. So yeah, if it's not the Americans, it's the Chinese also making AI. Now, the interesting part about this is a lot of these Chinese companies, and there are American companies as well, like Meta, God forbid, are actually making open source models. And I'm kind of wondering why these companies don't actually want to talk about them. So I did a little bit of a deep dive in today's video, and interestingly enough, I'm going to show you guys how to get this stuff going. So for instance, if you are somebody that wants to completely own your shit without giving up to these big companies and letting them fist you in the ass, you can get your ass an actual operating system that is respectful. No need to pay insane licensing fees, no need to have watermarks on the side of your screen, no need to have any form of unneeded bloatware that you have to constantly surgically remove. CachyOS is what I've been using for quite a while now. And it's one of the fastest Linux distributions that I've been gaming underneath, playing my stuff underneath, probably the snappiest distribution you can absolutely get. And combining this with a tool known as LM Studio, and I've talked about things like Olama in the past, but dude, this LM Studio shit is so insane that you can actually download it pretty much for everything, whether it be for Linux, whether it be for Windows, whether it be for Mac. So I ended up actually downloading it, and surprisingly, it is so well supported. Actually, I talked about this probably a year ago, but things have changed so much in the span of 1 year in this technology space that you can download some of the bestest, most banger open source models out there. Now, to walk you guys through how insane some of this stuff is, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of how easy it is to actually get local stuff running on your system. Now, provided you have an Nvidia GPU, and I think maybe AMD stuff works fine in Intel, so to speak, you can basically go and download a whole bunch of models. So for here, I actually have a coder model that I just downloaded, and the size of these can depend on how many parameters models have. So this 80 billion parameter model runs in a 4-bit quantized format, which is usually designed because you can't load in an entire $80 billion or 80 billion parameter model in your system. So here you can see that this is alone just 44 gigabytes in size. Now, the smaller the parameters go, for instance, the smaller the size becomes. And typically the quicker they go, the faster they run, and the less RAM they require. Now, I think for most people who have gaming systems out there, if you have a decent GPU with a fair bit of VRAM, you might be able to get away with these 8 billion parameter models. Now, the interesting thing about these models that I really appreciate is how powerful they become when you expose things like the internet. Now, for instance, I use something known as Seer X and G. Now, in these Docker containers, you can see that I actually have this completely running, Seer X and G. Now, to access this, I basically bring up a web browser that is running localhost. It's running on my actual system, and I can look for things like Quen Coder, for instance. I can hit enter and it'll actually do a search on the internet through various browsers. It'll actually give me search results without all the ads and the bullshit, literally within seconds. So if you want a search engine that is actually private and respectable, look up something known as Seer X and G. I'm actually just going to put that together in the big Google video so you can wait for that. But once I actually had that enabled, what I could do with the system was actually feed it the MCPs, which allows it to interact with what is known as Seer X and G. So here it actually has an MCP. And what that allows it to do is basically I can go into the model, as long as it's enabled, I can say, look online for Nvidia canceling orders, or not canceling orders, Nvidia stopping production for gaming GPUs. Now, this is a search, and a lot of like AIs will make you do a search engine, and or a lot of AIs will allow you to search for things on the internet. But these are typically AIs that are rate limited, right? Like after a while, you can't keep using them. Now here I'm going to feed it a quick model over here, and it'll actually do the search for me. So I'll spin up this coder model, for instance, just really quickly. And the smaller models work really well too, but again, this is something that requires tool calling. So here, once the model is loaded in, I just hit the send button. It'll actually communicate with the model. It'll do a web search on the internet. It'll actually then read what it's found, and then it'll give you the actual answers. And it'll even give you citations. So ultimately, I was able to do this all without... I was able to do this stuff literally, I'm not even joking, without requiring the internet. Now, of course, obviously it's an AI, so it can hallucinate. So obviously make sure you check these results. But again, it's also linked these situations, right? It's also linked all of these articles so you can read them for yourself too. But the point is, all of this happened locally. Everything was privately done. I didn't have to send my information off to a far end server and let it do its magic. Now, of course, obviously you can connect these things to coder models, and you can actually have very cheap in comparison to these big models and actually do some pretty powerful coding locally. And again, these are all possible literally with your own hardware, provided you have something strong. This was running on my laptop, but obviously, you know, this is a MacBook Pro, it's fairly expensive. But if you even have a consumer level GPU, you can do web searches, basic AI stuff, all privately, by the way. Hell, you can even use, a lot of the self-hosting stuff has gotten so good. I just wish more people knew about it. And I guess that's why I'm making this video, so I can teach people about it. But to give you an idea, I can feed it this Windows like wallpaper. I can be like, describe this image. And you can see right over here, it actually tells you it's a breathtaking panoramic photograph taken at dusk, capturing a sprawling city nestled at the foot of a large, imposing mountain. Again, it's interesting that people go out of their way to feed all of their information into like ChatGPT when this model loads onto my system and doesn't actually send my information off to servers around there. Guys, I don't know if anybody's told you, but setting up local artificial intelligence is like the easiest shit imaginable. And considering that a lot of you guys watching me have gaming computers, you literally are sitting on hardware that actually supports this kind of stuff. Now, what's also interesting to me too is I decided to like take this to the nth degree. Now, I'm not here to make like a definitive super guide about this. I will definitely talk about this a little bit more in a Google video. Now, something that I find to be really awesome is combining the coding models and the internet. Again, all freely done, by the way. You don't need to pay anybody for this third-party access. This is all locally done. One thing that was really cool, especially if you're like a Linux user and you need to know how your system works and you're scared of it, sometimes it's actually kind of cool to use these local LLMs, and provided they have internet access, they can actually fix up a lot of things for you. They can actually help you out with some of the complicated aspects of Linux. So for instance, right here, you're seeing it search online and assess my, GPU pass-through script, which I used to pass through with VMs. I actually had issues before, but once I let these LLMs look and fix these things up and browse the internet for updated like scripts and like guides, it was able to do this for me. It was actually kind of interesting to see. Obviously, you could even use things like Gemini if you wanted to, but again, I think when you locally do it, it's way cooler. But here's what blew my fucking mind, okay? Now with all these coding tools, right, a lot of them connect to the internet and scrape all the code online. Now you gotta pay money for this. But using a local editor called Zed, I was able to combine that with these local coding models, give them access to the internet via CRX and G, and all of a sudden they were coding like masterminds. It was crazy shit. And this is one of the things that like kind of gave me like this little eureka, like lights in the like light bulb in the head moment. I feel like a lot of companies have realized that people have access to literal data centers. I mean, this was something that even Jeff Bezos talked about. And obviously, I think a lot of the world's billionaires and people that run these AI companies hate this kind of shit. Why should we allow the common poor plebeian to have access to these local technologies that are doing pretty much 80 to 85% of the efficiency all on their own hardware? You know, the thing about it is a lot of these companies just enjoy the fact that we give up our access, we give up our actual data, when in reality, I'm always just baffled that nobody has talked about local artificial intelligence. I feel like in this vast space of the internet, I am like one of the very few people that is screaming into the void about running this stuff locally. Like, stop giving your information up willingly. Like, stop just giving away all of your stuff when you can actually run it locally. Now, I know before somebody goes, but Muda, what if that Chinese model is sending your information back home? Dog, I can unplug this computer, run this model, and it will perform all of the tasks that I've given. Hell, you can monitor your computer's network yourself and see whether these models are sending your information off covertly to the CCP, which they are not. Okay, and if you don't trust the fucking Chinese models, fine. There's plenty of American models that'll steal your information for you. The point is, a lot of these exist, and they're able to do like, what, 99% of the tasks, even the complex shit, without you giving away your stuff. And I feel like that's really where we're getting into, right? A lot of these AI companies I can't get into because you have to give up your information, and they also limit you pretty severely. Like, if you actually do your diligence and like calculate how much money you'd spend if you paid per usage, those bills rack up crazy. I literally talked about something known as like OpenClaws. Like, I talked about ClaudeBot, and I showed you literally just that tool alone could rack up an insane bill if you didn't know what the hell you were doing. And all of a sudden, we're sitting here with actual usable hardware, and we're not even using it ourselves. I feel like for companies like Nvidia and a lot of these organizations, taking this away from the average person, let alone the gamer, is sort of the actual like thing to have. A lot of these companies don't really talk about these local systems. They don't really teach people how to use this stuff unless it's like a super niche thing. If a lot of these companies made like proper guides on how to ditch ChatGPT, OpenAI would probably lose a significant chunk of their relevance if people actually figured out that they can use this shit without giving up their stuff and, you know, without actually being spied on through it, right? Like, imagine you're working on a project through something like Claude and you're wondering, damn, I imagine if they're just taking all of the stuff that I'm working on and storing it into their massive systems to train on, which probably is happening. Even if they tell you it's not happening, it's probably happening. You know, it's crazy too, like the Steam machine was one of those things that I was looking at. In fact, actually the Steam headset was something I was looking into. I didn't talk about this initially, but apparently Valve is trying to get games running natively on the actual headset, which is really, really cool shit to see. But of course, obviously, this device has sort of been delayed to later in 2026, and we still don't even know the price, which, to give you an idea, because of how expensive all of these computer components are, yeah, buying the little GameCube is gonna be fucking pricey. And you know, it could have also been another tool that people could have used to escape the sort of like tethered AI bubble that people are sort of attaching us into. Look, again, AI, a lot of this shit is sort of ruining the prospects for gamers, right? That said, I'm not somebody that's wholly against the technology. I just realized that, listen, we open Pandora's box. Pandora's, you know, all the demons are escaping, but the only way that we can actually, like, at least control something is teaching people on how to use this technology in a much more ethical, much more safer, and much more private way. And I feel like as good as some of these local things have gotten, these local technologies, they're not perfect, but as good as they are, I feel like none of these companies want people to have access to this shit going forward. One of my favorite videos from like PewDiePie lately was him showing off his like homemade AI server, where like he literally had like an entire like array of like AI models working together as if they were like the Roman Senate. And I thought that was some of the coolest shit imaginable. And I feel like that kind of stuff companies don't want you to have access to. They really don't, right? Because ultimately, why not just limit people's hardware choices, force them into your ecosystem, and then these people can basically control what you have access to? And ultimately, I feel like down the road, when it comes to working with these AI tools, eventually we're going to get to a point where and we're already kind of at that point where a lot of these companies can dictate what you can and what you can't make. Like, surprisingly, one of the things that'll make you laugh is, Grok, like Elon's XAI, like they make Grok, like the actual AI tool. Well, it turns out the actual developers at XAI were using their competition to code and make their AI better. Now, ultimately, Claude, the company Anthropic that runs it, came in and just basically cut them out. And again, they did it because they didn't agree on competition, like competitive software being made using their shit, which kind of makes sense. But then it shows you that these companies basically decide at their level what they want you to do and what they don't want you to do. And there's no regulation surrounding it. I mean, this is a very unregulated industry. So ultimately, I feel like we're headed towards this dark future where access to our hardware, buying computers is going to be a thing of the past. And in the future, it's like, hey, you want to get access to a fast gaming computer? Get a thin client, pay your $20 a month, and join the herd. But I feel like when you let that happen, and again, this is just like a conspiracy theory, but it's the more and more you see the memory shortages, the more and more you see the focus from some of these companies shifting towards the big AI data center, the harder it is for you not to consider the conspiracy theory to actually be true, right? Because look, at the end of the day, all right, I want to be able to own my gaming systems and my computer. I want to be able to do shit in my house. I want to be able to run software that is respectful for me. But if we get into the future where you don't actually own anything and it's going to be rapidly taken away, we better address these issues now and at least educate people that the technologies that are being forced onto us can be used ethically and privately. So if you are an AI nerd out there, consider, for a second, LM Studio. Use something locally, all right? Consider the open source. Consider the self-hosted route, okay? Because I feel like in the next 10 years, if we let this shit go on longer than it already has and this bubble don't pop, then I feel like owning a computer is going to be the sort of thing we talk about as if it was a fleeting memory of the past. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like if you dislike it, I am out.